Chapter 25. Using this new concept in ORD of sheet creation through something called named boundaries. This is very different than Powered Geopack, so let's just get right into it. Okay, the first thing we're going to want to do is open up a Sheets file in the Sheets folder if one exists. Let's see, we may need to create one. We go to our student CAD. Now instead of going to design, we're going to go to Sheets just like we would have in the past. And I guess I did not set up a file in this template, so let's go ahead and create a new file. And here we do need to point to our student folder. Again, under CAD Sheets. And then let's take a look down at the very bottom. Actually, let's hit the Browse button. I want to make sure that you're using the correct seed file, because this could be confusing. You've got the regular two choices here of i.ing, which is just a regular 2D file, the i.ing 3D file, and you do have these sheets, these other types of DGNs that are, one is strictly the drawing model, and one is the sheets model. Now we're not actually going to be using either of these right now. We are actually just going to use that same 2D file that we typically use for the vast majority of our CAD files. And then of course we want to use that standard IDOT file naming convention, which if you're doing work for IDOT, always starts off with the D and the district number, the contract number, dash, and then we could call up the CAD manual, but if you did, you'd find out that the file naming convention is SHT dash, I think it's PLN PRF. But for best practice, you're probably best off on just keeping up that CAD manual most of the time, so you can always reference it. So I'll actually do that real quick just to make sure I got this file naming convention correct. Not that it matters for class so much, but just, you know, good practice in a standardization to make sure we are staying standard, because especially with ORD, it seems like you're best off if you don't have to go back and rename files later when you're providing IDOT with deliverables. So I'm going to go with, let's see, file naming in the search bar. Yeah, there we go. There's our standard file naming. And there's our design files, our standard file naming. But we want to keep going down until we get to our sheets. And there it is, starting on page 67. So let's see, standard file naming for plan and profile sheets. Oh, it's in here somewhere. Probably right in front of me. Oh, there it is, and went too far. On sheet 66, you got plan sheets and then you've got profile sheets, but we want the plan and profile sheets, so yeah, that is the file naming, PLN PRF. Okay, and I think that's what we had. Good to go. So I'm going to save that in my sheets file, in my sheets folder, I should say. And then once this file opens up, the very first thing we are going to do is reference into the regular design file any plan view elements that we want to show up in our sheets file. And then I would say we would also add the alignment, but actually, and the reason for the alignment is the profile. But I guess what I'm saying is that if you reference in the alignment, as you know nowadays, you get both the alignment and the profile from that one design file. So, okay, let's go to our reference dialog, and let's just attach anything that we want to show up in our plan sheet, for deliverables, but really anything that you want to show up in your plan sheet, period, that maybe you have the display off most of the time. So let's path out to our design folder, and we know we definitely want the alignment. The corridor, I don't typically leave the corridor turned on for deliverables, but you could, and it's also useful. You can turn on and off the display. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the corridor file. Definitely going to bring in the design file. The image file I'm going to use a lot for phase 1. I typically turn the display off for phase 2 sometimes. My right-of-way now is in that separate file, so I need to bring that in, and of course my topo. You do not need to bring in that super file, and you do not need to bring in your existing terrain. So in this case of our training scenario here, we're bringing in everything except for those two files, the terrain and the super. So let's go open. Apparently I didn't have some of these files associated to the work set, but that was okay. I still want to bring those in, and I just keep saying okay here. And there I will do a fit view. I think for the time being I'm going to turn the display of my image off for now. Let me do a fit view. There we go. Okay. Now, one thing, if you are a Power Geopic user, the first thing you probably notice right off the bat is the fact that, there's not a separate file for the sheet layout like there was in the past. We used a file named layout.dgn. Well, layout.dgn does not exist in ORD. Instead, the sheet borders are actually in the sheet file. Okay. In fact, there's a lot of differences about setting up sheets. So that's just one of them. Also, the plan and profile sheet is not going to be a cell. I guess technically you could use a cell. That, as far as setting up plan sheet, that's not really the way the system's really made to work, I would say, in ORD. They've got a whole new setup with sheet indexing and all these things that require this method that I'm about to show you here. So just follow along, and just don't try to compare this at all to Power Geopic or anything else, because like I said, it's just totally different. Okay, at this point, what you might want to do, you don't have to do this right away necessarily, but at some point before we cut these sheets, what you're going to want to do is turn on and off certain levels. It just makes it easier once your sheets are created, because all of your sheets are going to be in a separate model. And actually there's going to be two, in addition to this design file, there's going to be two separate models for every sheet. And one of those models is called a drawing file, which is where all the labeling is done. And then the other one is called a sheets model, where there's really no drafting in it. It's just, that is where when you print, that it comes from the sheets model. So really, as far as like drafting, as far as I should say, adding additional text in that, and any kind of elements in that for sheets, really all that's done in the drawing model. But one thing that is important when you bring all your files in that you want to show up in your sheets is that really whatever display you have turned on, whatever levels you have turned on here, do a save settings here, when you set up your sheets, those are the levels by default that are going to be turned on. So if you have some things turned off here, you're going to find yourself, let's say you've got 20 sheets, you got to go into every file just by default. Now later I can show you some advanced type stuff where it can assist you with making changes to all of your models at the same time. But by default, what you'll find yourself doing is just resetting those levels on every sheets model, which is kind of annoying. So usually what I try to do here is right off the bat, think about what I want to show up in that sheets file. And initially that's probably most everything. Maybe with the corridor file, maybe you want all the levels off, or perhaps at this stage in the game, you turn the construction limits on and you use the construction limits from the corridor file. That's something that'd probably be common early on in the project and maybe through phase 1. Now once you get to phase 2 and your model's about set, you're probably going to be really tweaking that construction limits, because all these construction limits are really automated. And maybe there's scenarios where you have an entrance where you just want the construction limits to look a certain way, so you end up copying in the construction limits to your design file, making those slight modifications there. But it's kind of a work in process, throughout the development of your job. Initially working in phase 1, you're probably using some kind of combination of certain elements from your corridor model and elements from your design model, if you've done any drafting, proposed drafting at that point. So, but in my case here, when I get started, I'm probably just going to turn the display on of everything. I'm going to probably just make sure probably all my levels are turned on. I would, maybe with the exception of the corridor, I usually go through and I turned off like these corridor levels. Yeah, we'll go with something like that. And then as far as like what you're seeing here, that line right there, that text, you may want to, once you get to your sheets, that may have came in handy early on, but you may want to go back into that image file and change the streaming that you're pointing to. Well, it'd be the same stream, the Bing stream, but you might want to change it to straight up Arial instead of the one that says something like Arial with labeling. And we'll do that in a bit here. Alright, that looks good. So let's do a save settings, and we'll get started setting up our sheets. But remember too that we're setting up not just our plan view, but these are plan and profile sheets. So in that case, let's go ahead and open up our profile model also, which of course we do that through the geometry tab, open profile model. I select the proposed alignment, and then I choose one of my windows over here. I'll just choose 3, data point inside, and there I'm seeing my referenced profiles from, and of course this is coming from the alignment DGN. Okay, so yeah, I'm seeing my existing profile, my proposed roadway profile, and my special ditch profile. I might go ahead and do a save settings again at this point, just in case I get out and I want to come right back into the same location. Okay, the next thing you're going to want to do is, and this seems a little bit like setting up sheets in Power Geopack, but it's different, but a little bit like that, where we're setting the borders. Now these borders are, a little bit different because they're going to be live borders, meaning what defines the area that you see of the references are based on the shape, and you can move that shape or manipulate that shape in any way, and that automatically is reflected on your sheets file, which is a little different since we usually just use the fence method in the past for setting up our sheets, and that border that you were used to using in the past wasn't a live border. So, okay, here's how you go about that process. We go up to the Drawing Production tab, and then we go over to, under Name Boundaries, we're going to just click on, the main icon here, the Name Boundaries, and it's going to bring up this dialog here, and you see several choices across the top. You've got Civil Plan, a plan by element, cross sections that we'll be using later, some of these other ones that we can use for little details. To get started, we're going to use the very first one, the Civil Plan. Then we'll have to go back and add the profile and link it to this after the fact. But we start off with the first one, the plan. Then we look at the drawing seed, and we say, okay, what do we want? A 20 and 5? Do we want a double profile with our plan, a single profile at the various scales, or do we want a plan and profile rule plan, 5 vertical, 50 horizontal? That's probably, that probably the most common, maybe that with plan profile sheets, maybe this one, and then that 20 and 5. In this case, it's rule, not urban, so we are going to be using the 50 and 5. And that automatically sets my detail scale up here to 1 equals 50, in which on my annotation up here, of the particular design file that I'm in right now, it's set to 50 also. Okay, it gives me this default name. You can change that name if you want. Description. We're going to be creating this new group. Oh, what's it asking me? Okay, it wants me to get right, and we can do that. It's saying, oh, I see. You always have to be aware of this. See how the bottom is highlighted, the profile? We're working with plan. I should go up there and data point to make sure it knows I'm working with my plan view. And so, well, let's just get started here. Let's data point on the alignment. All right, when you do that, notice it starts tracking you right here based on that alignment that you just selected. So, we can key in our start stations and our stop stations, or like everything else, we can dynamically set it. I'll just go over here and go with the very beginning 100. I'll just go past it a little bit and data point. And so there's my start station. So it's all set. Now it's asking me for my the ending station, right? So let's see, I'll just go up here somewhere far enough to where I can see it's giving me that second sheet anyway. Alright, and then I decide, do I like this or do I want to change it? I can still go back and change that starting and stopping station. I think on this, if you wanted to actually extend just a little bit beyond the job, I need to look into this a little bit. One way, and I think on the way I probably did on this job initially was, you might want to, when you store your proposed chain, you may have wanted to just go back further and then introduce, a station equation at this point, and then you're just starting back further on the alignment. I need to look to see if it may even have the option of allowing you to slide the sheets even beyond the alignment. Not sure on that one. I would typically myself probably not do that. When I stored the alignment, I probably would have went back first and introduced that station equation. But let's go ahead and just go with this for now. So if I like what I see here, I'm just going to data point and go for it. One thing that I may want to point out, one thing you may or may not want to change is see where it says boundary chords. And you can change this now or later or leave it the way it is. But because these borders are live, imagine this, when this is set up on your sheet and it's horizontal and everything, know that the clip boundary is the sheet. So the clipped is not going to be horizontal. The clipped is going to follow the alignment based on the number of chords. So I don't know, I found a time that I needed to adjust that. I think I've always done it kind of after the fact, maybe as I use this more, and if I find myself that I'm not really wanting to totally follow the alignment like that, maybe I'm just wanting 2 or 3 chords, not 5. I could probably change that here, and then I wouldn't have to delete those vertices later, which you can do at any time using just basic microstation tools. So I'm going to go ahead and data point to accept this. Notice at the bottom it says create drawing. And you can do that at the fact because we are going to need that separate model created, but we're not quite ready for that. We're probably just going to go ahead and wait and create those boundaries all at the same time once we've added in our profile. So I'm going to leave create boundary untoggled. I data point to accept, and now I've got my sheet boundaries set. If I hover over those boundaries, this is something I like, that it tells me, hey, that's plan 1, plan 2. You'll find later on, once you get further into your job, and sometimes you want to go look at the whole strip versus just a certain sheet, it's really nice to be able to just hover over that and immediately which plan sheet you're dealing with. So okay, the next step is to add our profile boundaries. So we're just going to go back to name boundaries, and this time we're going to toggle our civil profile. And just like the first one, it's going to ask what seed would you like to use, and again we're going to use that profile, the 50 and 5. That's urban. Let's see, we went the rule 50 and 5, so it's like the second one down. And we can name it here, description, and then the method. What method do we want to use? Station limits, but we say no, we want the plan group. In the plan group, what that means is you'll get the same limits of the profile that you get of the plan view, and that's almost always the case. What you would want. So I'm going to leave that set to plan group. Let's see, could give that a name. I think I'm just going to leave that. I could adjust my clearances in here. I think initially here, we'll probably just go with the defaults. If we don't like it, we can come back later and change some of these. Looks good. I think we're just going to go with the defaults on this. Change it later if need be. So okay, so the next thing that you need to do is identify the profile itself. So I'm going to click on the proposed profile here. I should be seeing those boundaries, I believe. It says 2 boundaries created. Let's see. Yeah, they're there. You might have to data point a second time. There's my boundaries. I can kind of zoom in a little bit to see if it grabbed everything. And like I was saying, these boundaries you're going to notice are different than like using a cell. You know, when we used plan profile sheet cells, the area of the plan view and the area of the profile was predefined. In fact, it was all built in. You know, that grid was all part of the cell, and it was always the same size. But what you're going to see here that it's different. Depending on the plan and profile sheet, you could end up with a smaller amount of profile area. You know, if your profile is very, very flat, what that allows you to do then is to, you know, expand out your plan view, you know, area if you like, and only use a smaller portion for the profile view. So it's very flexible that way. I do like that. We'll just go for the defaults now, and I can see already that's probably going to be a fairly small area. But yeah, just know that I could have went up here and said available profile height. I think that's where I would just change that to a larger number, and then, you know, maybe it would provide more room for labeling for me or something. But let's see how this turns out initially. We can always go back and adjust it later if need be. So I'm going to data point to accept. And again, I still have not created any additional models, any drawing models or sheet models. In fact, I can see that if I go up here to this manage groups, which really I should probably point out is the same thing as if you, I just pulled out this tool, but really it's the same thing. If you go to view and then in ORD, they have this view groups built into the ribbon. You could use it there, or of course it's kind of the same thing as going to home, or somewhat similar, and go to the models. You know, you see all your models in this file right there. So in any case, I can see I have not, you know, done that yet. So let's go back to drawing production, our name boundaries. And then if we're ready to go here, let's see. Okay, we said we did not want to create the drawing at this point. So I think we can actually close that out and see that little triangle down there in the bottom. Yeah, we bring up this name boundaries here because we chose to, you know, create the other models after the fact. We're going to go to this location and we're going to expand out our plan group. And if we were to look at the profile group, you know, we can see that this is linked to the plan group. See where it says link profile group. So here's the plan and it's linked to profiles. So we can just go up to the plan group if we like, right click, well, a couple ways of doing this. I right click and then I can say create my plan and profile drawing, and it'll go straight to that and do it for me immediately. Or if I have this show create dialog toggled on, it won't immediately create the drawing. It'll show me all the defaults that are set up, which you may or may not want to change. I like to turn it on just to see what those defaults are set up. So I'm going to leave it turned on, and then when I go to create plan and profile drawing, it's going to bring up this dialog for me. And I can see that, you know, on the left is the plan, on the right is the profile. And it's just telling me, okay, this is what we're going to create. You know, there's your drawing model. You know, this is the scale that's going to be used. This is the annotation group that's going to be used. Let's look at that closely. Okay, actually I can see, I think I said this backwards. Looks to me like on the right it's, no, I take that back. It's top to bottom. The top is plan, the middle on both sides is the drawing model for the plan and the profile, and then you get your sheets model at the bottom. And so let's see, yeah, let's just go for that. I think I'm going to change one thing here. I think let's change that to on this is the drawing model only. I know on the sheets model we want that to be set to 1 equals 1. I thought here is that's going to be set to 1 inch equals 50. And do we want the plan annotate? Well, I don't know. Yeah, well, let's go ahead and go with this actually. Especially, I tell you what, if you're doing work for a district office, by default it's set to none. But I'd say if you're doing IDOT work, that you probably want to go ahead and do this, because then it'll throw in a north arrow for you automatically at the right rotation, which is pretty nice. So this job was in District 5. I think I'll go ahead and just turn that on, plan annotation, District 5. It had already set up this annotation for profiles over here, which is great. And then a couple more choices at the bottom. So when we process this, do you want to immediately open up that model? Sure. And then it's going to add, do you want to add this to the sheet index? And that's what I've been talking about. This is this new thing. Now I typically wait on that and do that separately. You could do it now, but the problem is if you don't get the exact result that you like, then you end up having to go through and modifying it. Things. I prefer to just wait and do it after the fact. So I'm going to leave sheet index untoggled, and then later I'll tell you about what that is and why it was so important that initially you set up a work set for this group, because that's where that information is stored, and you don't want, like, for every one of your projects for the information to be stored at one general location. You want it to be stored at the project location, but when you create that work set. So okay, let's keep going. I'm going to click on OK, and we see it processing. So it is creating for us right now drawing models, sheets models, all that sort of thing, and it brought up the very last thing it created, which was okay, I'll talk about that later. Let's go back to the default. So this is where we started, right? Plan view. Okay, so what else do we have now? We have plan 1, plan 2, and profile. Well, both 1 and 2 profiles, right? So the one that, well, I guess it's pretty intuitive. The one that has the sheet in quotes is the sheets file. And like I said, you're mainly just printing from that. We're going to do a little manipulation of it, moving some references around just a little bit. But generally speaking, you're really not doing any drafting at that level. Like I said, all your labeling is going to be done in the drawing model, which that's the one that does not have the sheet in brackets. It just says Plan 1 View. And it looks like this. And so notice several things are happening here. So this is like a special type of design file. It's a drawing file, actually, a drawing model. Some things that it did for us, well, because we had that annotation group turned on, that's the reason why it brought in that District 5 north arrow. I can see what would have probably been nice when IDOT set this up if by default, maybe we could do that ourselves later, but by default in view attributes for the seed, it looks like they had fill turned off, so I like leaving that fill turned on. Just save settings. Now this view was actually rotated. So in Power Geopack, you kind of had an option sort of like this, but the definitely IDOT internally and some of the consultants operated that way, and that was to not rotate the view, but rotate the reference file. But this system rotates the view, not the reference file. So what does that mean? That means, this, when I say rotate view, it's like rotate, it automatically rotated this view for us. And it does, so in order to do that, it also used something, and this is not new to MicroStation, something called saved views. So, and this was automatic also. It created for us these saved views, and I believe that that's how it knows and how it continues to, even if you were to rotate this some other way, so you can get it back to the proper rotation, to where it's horizontal. And there's many advantages to that. The big one's going to be when you place text. Now all the text is horizontal. You're not trying to line the text up with the sheet border or something like that. Notice it also brought in the curve data from the alignment, and when it did so, all this new stuff is all annotated. So I believe if I was to change that to 20 scale, yeah, see how everything changes. But we're set up as 50 scale. So even regardless of what the alignment was set to, it's going to annotate in this drawing model for me at 50 scale as we take a look at this. One thing I'm trying to figure out how to work out best is, I used to always copy the curved data in so I could just easily move it around and things, but the text is not normal text of the curved data. It's kind of live also, and you'll find yourself, even if you go into the alignment file and make changes to that text, and then you go back and it reverts back. The reason for that being is that this built-in annotation is always kind of updating. So I'm learning to deal with that. Most recently, what I've been doing, not initially, but for the final product, and we'll see, this may or not be the best way, but when I get to the end of the job, I copy the curve data into this file like I did in the past, and then I turn off the reference level, and then I also drop the status of this so it doesn't automatically keep trying to re-annotate. If that makes any sense. Let's not get stuck on that, but that's something that'll throw you off that you need to be aware of. In fact, I really don't even really worry too much about the placement of, this is early on in the job as far as where that curve data. I know you might feel the need to go through and start cleaning up all the stuff initially. I would probably wait, a little bit longer than you normally would, just to see where your labels are going to be in things, so you don't keep changing it. Any of the stuff that's automated, I just kind of go with it, leaving it, knowing that later, for the end product, I am going to clean it up later for sure. But let's just go with that as is for now. We'll come back later and talk about labeling and annotations and all these new concepts of text favorites and just a completely different way to go about labeling. Okay, now let's take a look at the Sheets file. And it looks like actually the area that was used will be fine. I talked about initially, possibly adjusting that area. I think I'll just leave it probably as is. And you can see there's a little bit of cleanup here that would need to be done. We also talked about the boundaries being live, so that's, you're like, well, I would like, if I'm going to leave the aerial image on, I'd like it to look a little bit more clean, all those kinds of things. And if you do, that's why I was saying you might want to go in and change the number of vertices that were used, and we can clean that up, and it will immediately be shown here in this file. Now it automatically brought in the sheets. Not sure why it brought this. I need to look to see why it brought in this particular sheet border. It may have been that I may have been sitting in the wrong working set, and that's the reason why it pointed to it. I'm guessing that's what's going on there. So I may want to get out of the Sheets file and make sure that it's associated to Student 1, not another project I had been working on, which in that case it's going to be pointing to the wrong working set. So let's see, these videos are probably going a little longer than others. I better stop it here and then just talk about plan sheets and parts, because there's really a lot to cover. So let's end it here.